Killer Innovations Podcast for Sunday, August 21st, 2005, show number 24, brought to you from hot and humid Washington, D.C. Welcome to the Killer Innovations Podcast. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. Before we get started, please keep in mind that the opinions and information expressed in this podcast are mine and mine alone and do not necessarily reflect those of my past, current, or future employers. Well, since the launch of iTunes 4.9, we've had a number of new listeners, so I wanted to kind of take this upfront portion of the podcast and give kind of a quick introductory to those of you who are joining us here in the Killer Innovations Podcast. So, some of you may be asking, what is your definition of a killer innovation? Well, a killer innovation is a significant and highly profitable departure from current products or services that will be difficult for your competitors to imitate. The key being highly profitable and difficult to imitate. So what about these killer questions? You hear, maybe you've listened to one of the podcasts all the way through and you've heard this constant reference to killer questions. Well, the quality of ideas you generate are tied to the quality of the questions you are asking. So each week in the podcast, I'll share a question from my personal collection that I've used in my own killer innovation workshop. So these are proven questions that lead to unique insights. And so I get a lot of questions as to why are you doing this podcast? Well, hopefully by sharing with you my personal experiences along with proven tools, tricks, and insights, first of all, you'll learn that being creative and being innovative is not something that you're just born with. It's a skill you can learn, a skill you can practice, and a skill that you can become very proficient at. And hopefully, through this podcast and learning these tools and these tricks and learning not only from this podcast but participating with the other listeners in the KI community section of the website, that you'll unleash your own potential to create the next killer innovation. By the time you're listening to this podcast, I'll already be in San Francisco. Quickly, let me run through some of my upcoming trips for September. September 8th through 12th, I will be in Amsterdam. September 13th through the 16th, I will be in Venice, Italy. The week of September 19th, I will be in San Francisco. And the week of September 26th, I will be in Singapore. If I happen to be in your area, please drop me an email and let's try to get together. I'm actually getting together with one of the listeners this week while I'm in San Francisco. In the future, I'm going to post these event schedules where I'll be either speaking or attending on the new Killer Innovation website, which hopefully will be launched soon, to make it easier for these meetups. If I happen to be in your area, let me know. Love to get together for dinners, for drinks, whatever the case might be. Thanks for the feedback. Email volume has definitely picked up. Really appreciate the comments and show suggestions. And if there's topics that I've covered on the podcast that you think warrant getting into more detail on a follow-up podcast, let me know. And please join in on the conversation at the KI community site. So click on KI community button on the killerinnovations.com site. As always, you can reach me at podcast@killerinnovations.com. You can call me on the feedback line, +1 703 636 4460, or you can always Skype me at Phil_McKinney. And all this contact information is on the upper right-hand side of the killerinnovations.com website. For today's show, segment 1, I want to talk about fast prototyping. Now, I've mentioned prototyping in the past about how important it is, and you'll also see it in the gate milestone chart that is posted in the KI community section of the website that you can download. And actually, it's interesting, one listener has actually created a modified version of that gate milestone specifically for consulting. So go out there, take a look, and if you're using that document in your own business and you've modified it, please post it back. So in the gate milestone process and in previous podcasts, I've talked about the value and the importance of doing prototyping. Now, in many cases, people, when they think about prototype, think about building an exact model, maybe trying to do it a little bit faster, called rapid prototyping. But what I'm really talking about is what I call fast prototyping. And what's the difference between a fast prototype and a rapid prototype? Well, first of all, when I talk about fast prototyping, I'm talking in timelines of literally hours to maybe days in order to do the entire process of creating this prototype. Versus when you think about rapid prototyping, you're thinking about weeks, maybe a month to get that prototype built, or maybe multiple months in some cases. So what makes up a fast prototype? Well, the key characteristics of a fast prototype is you use material at hand. You're not going out and getting specialty materials. You're literally using scissors, glue, cardboard, paper, things that you have normally around in your office or in your home. Two, it's not functional. We're not looking to build something that will actually do what it is you're trying to do. What you're trying to do is create something that creates something that you can tangibly hold in your hand, tangibly show to a customer, not in its perfect form, but in order to elicit early feedback from the customer. So the key here is allow for the feedback early and often so that you can iterate very, very quickly. The key around fast prototyping also is that it portrays size and it creates the visual cues. What is it going to look like in my hand? What is it going to look like on my desk? What is it going to look like in my factory? The other is on a fast prototype is that it's developed by the inventors. You're not using any specialty third-party companies. You're not hiring outside consultants to come in and do this. You, the inventor, you've got the picture in your mind, getting something in a 3D form, if it's a physical product, or some way to mock up and give the experience if it's some kind of a service, or for instance, a software system. But you, the inventor, this is something that you're going off and you're creating. Now, when we talk about rapid prototyping, we're talking about a more refined model. It may, in fact, be functional, but it clearly looks like the finished product. So it's going off and using specialty, plastics and foam shapers and doing all kinds of the stuff that we typically see when we're thinking about some kind of a rapid prototype. It looks like the finished product. And typically those are built by specialty companies or model makers if you have those in your company. So what's the real difference, though, from the standpoint of how fast you can react to the marketplace? Well, in fast prototyping, or what I would sometimes refer to as iterative prototyping, the analogy I use is really fire, aim. So you get out there, get something in front of the customer, get that feedback, modify it, get something else out there. So it's really basically on the fire, aim, meaning fire, meaning shoot the bullet, get something out there to get feedback from the customer. Versus kind of the rapid prototyping or actually getting into the production of a product, what I would call meticulous prototyping. You're trying to make it look perfect. You're trying to make it look just like it's going to be in the finished product. And part of the challenge there is management kind of gets in the way, and you kind of get caught up in this process of ready, aim, and you never pull the trigger to fire to get that product out there to get customer feedback. So again, fast prototyping, get it out there. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't even have to look like the finished product. You're getting it out there to get validation, get feedback from the customer. Now, some companies have really latched onto this quick or fast prototyping versus rapid prototyping. And for instance, in the case of Sony, when they're in this stage of prototyping, the typical cycle time for their prototypes is 5 days. Not weeks, not months, 5 days to get new versions or get prototypes out there for customer feedback. So the process I use when I'm in a stage of development where I want to do fast prototyping to get something in the customer's hands is first of all, define the test. What is it you're trying to get as far as information from the customer? What is it that you're hoping to show the customer in the form of this prototype? Now the key here is that I limit the definition of the test to 1 page. Not a page and a half, not a page and 1 sentence, 1 page. And the reason I constrain it to 1 page is it forces you to be clear and succinct in describing it. Otherwise, you get into, particularly when you have 5, 10, 15 people all putting their input in, this document can be 15, 20 pages, and it clearly blows itself way out of proportion of what it is you're trying to achieve. So again, define the test, 1 page only. 2, gather found materials. This isn't going off and finding that one manufacturer that's got that special translucent plastic that you want. You're not at that stage. This is using found materials. Cardboard, paper, cutting up a manila folder, cutting off of the styrofoam cup, using the found materials. Do it on the cheap. Next is you have to have a partner or a customer who's going to support the test. Basically, who are you going to show this fast prototype to in order to elicit their feedback? If it's people on the street, then you got to get ready to take that prototype, take it out there and show it to them. Are you going to invite people into the office? You got to have those people be able to come into the office. You need to set very tight guidelines. And I set the guidelines of 5 working days. This forces everybody in the team to be thinking about how I can do this fast and not perfect. Next is you got to conduct the test. Get it out there, get the people, show it to them, and actually have something that they can actually touch and look at and interact with. While the test is going on, you need to observe the interactions. This is where taking photographs, recording the audio, so you're not trying to take notes, but you're capturing the nuances and the questions and the tone of voice if they're asking a question, but it comes across as being something like, I'm asking this question because I really don't know what I'm trying to ask. So audio is an important piece. Video, being, having the team members not all be hounding around one person, but maybe being remote and being able to observe the user seeing this prototype. Next is after you've done the test and you've observed it, debrief. Document what was right, what was wrong, what was the suggestions, and then set the next test date, which is 5 days out beyond that. So literally you're doing these 5-day cycles until you get to the point where you're comfortable that you've got at least the scope of what the product is and that you've got some initial feedback and response. And now when you're actually conducting the test, you just can't hand them the prototype because it's not going to look like the finished product. You have to describe to them the functionality. What will this product allow them to do? What will it enable? What kind of capabilities will it enable them to have done for them? So some examples of fast prototyping. Well, one is that I've seen is having literally doctors and nurses use Play-Doh to build a prototype of a new medical device for nurses, something that they can carry with them that can literally do a lot of the lab tests, literally bedside. And literally it looks like a Star Trek tricorder. But this was built by doctors and nurses through a brainstorming session, and they built it literally out of Play-Doh. I've seen also where literally people have taken cardboard and cut it up and using tape and glue to define the shape for a new mobile phone device. So they could actually hold it in their hand. Does it fit well? Does it fit in both a large man's hands and a small woman's hands and in a child's hands? Using cardboard to get that feel for the shape. For software, I've seen people use Visual Basic or Front Page to literally prototype an entire online experience. Nothing's happening behind the scenes, but at least you can have somebody sit down and say, here's kind of what we see the shopping experience be. We hear what the search experience would be, allowing them to give you feedback on that. And that's something, again, tools that the inventor can use. It doesn't require that you have to have a team of engineers or a team of specialists to go build it. Tools and techniques that you can do yourselves. So after you've done this fast prototyping, what's next? What is it that you do as far as the next step? Well, then you do move into rapid prototyping, which I would classify really as pre-production. So you're going to take all that feedback that you got from the fast prototyping cycles and use that as input for the rapid prototype, where you actually literally build it the way it's going to look. And the reason we do fast prototyping is it reduces the turnaround cycle on rapid prototyping. So if you have to go through 5 cycles to get all the customers' initial thoughts and ideas down and captured into a prototype, if that prototype is taking only 5 days, you can do that very, very quickly. If that prototype is taking literally a month each, you're now into 5 months, what you could have done in 5 weeks as far as capturing those initial customer thoughts and customer inputs. So again, ultimately the objective here is how do you shorten the length of time to go from early idea to finished product in the market. I'd be interested in seeing fast prototype examples that you've done or you've seen. So if you happen to have a picture of prototype work that you've done in your business or you think are good examples, send them to me and I'll create a gallery in the KI community site so that other people can kind of get an idea of what it is we're trying to talk about here with rapid prototype or fast prototyping. All I ask is please make sure that you have permission to share the photos. And with that, we're going to move on to segment 2. For those of you who are regular listeners, you know that we trade off segment 2 between being weak signals, talking about early trends that potentially you could use to identify killer innovation ideas, and stories of entrepreneurs who have gone off to create killer innovations. What was their history? How did they come to that point? And what questions led them to be able to find that killer innovation? So last week we did a weak signal, which was on tweens, those 10 to 14-year-old preteens, and the market opportunities that are available to them. So in this week, we're going to have an example of entrepreneur who has unlocked the killer innovation opportunity. Like many of the entrepreneurs we've discussed, Willard was born into poverty and went to work early in life. The son of a poor sheep herder, he began tending his father's flock at the age of 8, and by 14 he was hauling this sheep to market by rail from Ogden, Utah to cities as far away as San Francisco. At the age of 19, Willard traveled east as part of his work with his church, and for 2 years he wandered New England, finally ending up in Washington, D.C. After experiencing a typical hot and humid Washington summer, which is what we're having right now here in D.C., he thought to himself that if he could find a nice cold drink to sell there, he could make a ton of money. But the idea would have to wait. When Willard returned to Utah, he discovered that his father, along with most sheep herders, had gone bankrupt in the downturn of the market. Having witnessed enough poverty and wanting to build a better future, Willard, who never graduated from high school because of working with his father and tending the sheep, decided to complete his education. He talked his way into Weber State College, a community college that had recently been established in Ogden. When Willard cut a deal with the school's president, who just happened to have been Willard's 7th grade teacher, that also reinforces the fact of never burn your bridges. So he worked with the school's president, under which he would pay for his tuition by working at the school. After 2 years at Weber, Willard felt it was time for him to transfer to the University of Utah. And to earn money for tuition, he took a job selling woolen underwear to lumberjacks in the Pacific Northwest. Now, to sell the underwear, Willard came up with a very clever selling technique. He would pick 2 of the biggest, meanest lumberjacks he could find and challenge them to tear a pair of his underwear apart. If they could, he gave them a free pair. If they couldn't, they had to buy a pair. Invariably, the lumberjacks accepted his challenge. And invariably, they lost, and Willard sold a lot of underwear. During Willard's senior year at the University of Utah, an A&W root beer stand opened in Salt Lake City. Impressed by its success and remembering his experience in the Washington, D.C. summer, he purchased the Washington area A&W franchise. With a $1,500 of his own money and a $1,500 loan, Willard opened a 9-stool root beer stand on 14th Street in Washington, D.C. on May 20, 1927. With the help of his new bride, Willard ran the stand all summer with great success, but as winter approached, sales fell flat. Recognizing the seasonal nature of the soft drink business, he got permission from A&W to add food service and opened his first hot shop. That winter, while Willard waited on customers, his wife cooked chili, tamales, and barbecue sandwiches made according to recipes donated by the chef of the nearby Mexican embassy. And employing a shrewd promotional tactic, such as giving a free root beer coupon on street corners, and focusing on offering quality food at low prices, Willard quickly expanded his operation by adding 2 more locations. Always looking for new ways to improve his business, he bought the vacant lot next to one of his hot shops, removed the curb, and began offering the first drive-in service on the East Coast. Waiters, called curbers, ran food to the customers on a tray with a folded bracket they clamped onto the top of the car door. Customers loved it, and soon all 3 hot shops offered drive-in service. The move fueled further expansion, and by 1932, Willard had 7 hot shops in Washington, D.C., and was close to being a millionaire. But he wasn't willing to step aside and take that money and run. Willard's next innovation came in 1937. At Hot Shop Number 8, which sat near Hoover National Airport, the current site of the U.S. Pentagon, Willard noticed that airline passengers picked up a box lunch to eat on board the plane. A genius at finding a need and filling it, Willard decided to pre-box meals and sell them directly to the airlines, giving birth to the in-flight catering industry. And within a year, he was servicing 20 daily flights out of Hoover. While World War II caused hot shop revenues to drop, it also presented new opportunities. Willard began managing cafeterias and government office buildings and war production factories. When the war ended, prosperity returned and customers flooded the hot shops. By 1953, the 9-stool root beer stand had grown to 56 restaurants, serving a total of 30 million customers. After 30 years in the food business, Willard took the biggest gamble of his career. He bet it all. Recognizing the growth in travel and the natural extension of hot shops' traditional concern for the American family on wheels, Willard built his first motor hotel on 8 acres of land he purchased near what is now called Reagan National Airport. Willard built not just any hotel, but a 370-bed hotel, the largest in the world at that time. And this hotel became the launching event for Marriott Hotels. J. Willard Marriott, better known as J.W. Marriott, had spent 35 years working nonstop, meeting the needs of customers. This focus on the customer eventually resulted in establishing Marriott Corporation as one of the largest employers in the U.S., second largest lodging company in the world, and operating or franchising more than 1,900 hotels around the world. So, what insights or killer questions led Willard Marriott to his success? Well, one that came to my mind immediately was, which of my customers' hassles could I bypass or reduce? In this case, go back to the lumberjack portion of the story. The issue for the lumberjacks was buying things that had high quality. There was a big concern given their remoteness, it wasn't like they could easily return the item if it should fail. So, Willard Marriott, coming up with a clever selling technique of having them literally test the product themselves on a challenge, proved to the lumberjacks that what they were buying was high quality. So he took away the hassle, or the concern being, if I buy this, I'm going to have a huge hassle taking this back if the product does not work. A next killer question, I think, that kind of helps underscore some of the insight that Willard came up with was, can I increase my capacity by cutting the transaction time? Now, albeit using runners or car hops to deliver the food is good from the standpoint of kind of creating a unique experience for the customer, it also reduces the cycle time, meaning you can serve more customers. You don't have to have nearly as big of a restaurant, so your real estate costs are actually less, and you don't have to clean the tables. You simply pick up the trays, wipe them down, and you can serve the next customer. So the question was, again, can I increase my capacity by cutting the transaction time? In this case, using the car hops to run the food to the customers. Next, I think the question that really offered some unique insight for Willard was, who uses my product because of some benefit I did not foresee? In this case, being at Hot Shop number 8, he saw people coming in and buying these box lunches on their way to the airport. At that time, airlines did not serve food. Actually, today's airlines are getting away from serving food. So for instance, here in the US, if you fly United, you do not get fed any longer here in the US. You actually have to buy your food or you have to carry it on. So it's kind of interesting that we're going back to the throwback, back into the 20s and 30s. But here Willard saw people coming in and buying these box lunches. So he quickly identified by understanding of who uses my product because of some benefit that I did not foresee. But next up, that just didn't give him the innovation. The next question he had to answer was, what if I realign my relationship? So my relationship in case of Willard was with his customers. In this case, if he aligned his relationship with the airlines, he could work with the airlines to offer food in flight, giving birth to the airline food industry. And this became one of the cornerstones for Marriott in their long-term growth plan. And next, a question that, again, helped Willard identify that next innovation was, what unanticipated users need the functionality of my product or service? So during World War II, when the revenue fell off at the hot shops, Willard quickly identified the fact that during the war, there was this huge influx of workers into the DC area in support of the war effort. So Willard began working with the military to offer cafeterias in the government office buildings so that workers could be more productive, and also offer them a cheap alternative than the more expensive restaurants in the area for the workers who were moving in support of the war effort. Now with that, I think that kind of story with JW Marriott and understanding this constant focus on the customer and this constant look for the customer needs that are not being met, again, led to this killer innovation of Marriott Corporation. Moving on to segment 3, the killer question of the week. In segment 1, we talked about fast prototyping. So for the killer question of the week, we're going to go actually in the opposite direction. So the killer question for this week is, what in the product and service could I slow down to create a new experience for the customer? Clearly a contrast to the normal objective of making things faster in our accelerating world. Again, what in the product or service could I slow down to create a new experience for the customer? Now, some ideas that came to mind for me, for instance, is slowing down the serving of food in the fine restaurants to let the customer have that unique experience. Now, this is something that I've needed to get used to when I visit other regions such as Italy. I was in Rome a couple of months back, and you quickly figure out that in Rome, restaurants don't even open until 8 o'clock. And you can always tell the ugly Americans because after we've been sitting there for about 2 hours, we're harassing the waiter for the check so that we can get out of the restaurant. In that case, though, in many countries, meals take on 2, 3, 4 hours. But in some regions, such as in the US, if you're at a restaurant for more than a couple of hours, unless it's a very high-end restaurant, you kind of become annoyed at having so much of your time taking up in this experience. So again, slowing down the serving of a restaurant food in a fine restaurant to let the customer have that unique experience. Another idea that I came up with was slowing down a cruise ship. One of the complaints I have is that, some of the cruise ships that I've been on seem so focused on getting to the next port rather than really creating an at-sea experience. So it isn't so much about being out in the water and being away and not having to deal with the issues. It seems like a lot of these cruise ships are just focused on getting you to that next port, getting you off the ship so that you can go do yet more shopping, which is not one of my favorite things to do. So one idea is slowing down the cruise ship and really creating that at-sea experience. So again, this week's killer question is, what in your product or service could you slow down to create a new experience for your customer? And with that, thanks for listening. Please keep the feedback coming. Let me know how you like these stories. We got a lot of really positive response for the LL Bean story. So let me know your thoughts on the stories. They do take a lot of work. They take a lot of research. If you have stories or entrepreneurs, inventors who you think should be covered in one of the upcoming stories, send those to me. I can do the research and pull those stories together. I know many of these may be fairly U.S.-centric, so I am looking for other ideas. If you've got one, please send them to me. You can reach me at podcast@killerinnovations.com. You can phone me on the feedback line +1 703-636-4460, or you can always Skype me on Phil_McKinney. If you haven't voted, please visit Podcast Alley. So it's podcastalley.com. The votes and comments on Podcast Alley are the easiest way to say thanks for the time and effort that goes into researching and producing your favorite podcasts. So with whoever's on the top of your podcast list, go off to Podcast Alley and just give them a vote, drop them a comment, and continue to encourage them. Because needless to say, Adam Curry and others in the podcasting are making money. But 99% of the people that are involved in podcasting or who've been involved in podcasting for some time do it out of the passion for the subject matter and aren't looking for the money side of it. So encouragement goes a long way. Please join in on the conversation about creativity, innovation, ideas, weak signals by visiting thekillerinnovations.com and clicking on the KI Community button. We've got, 50 or 60 articles now posted over there, a lot of comments, some good discussions going on. I'm trying to be out there regular, posting new things. So please join in on the conversation, contribute your own material too, and be part of the community. The Killer Innovations Podcast is a proud member of Tech Podcast Network. If it's tech, it's here. Visit techpodcast.com to discover the best in technology podcasts. Now, one podcast in particular that I would recommend is Clark Boyd's podcast. Clark is the BBC World Technology Reporter who's now podcasting, and his podcast is definitely on my must-listen list. So again, thanks for listening. Stay subscribed. Get others to subscribe, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.